When I'm worried, my mind feels tangled up like spaghetti noodles. And let me read to you where, every card has an invitation to focus on the body. When we often worry when we're faced with something new and don't know how it will go. Think of a time you felt worried. Where did worry visit you? In your tummy, your forehead, your earlobes? For some, worry feels trembly like a leaf in the wind. For others, it feels jiggly like a bowl of jello.
And so that's a great example of how the cards are kind of training this awareness, not just of feelings, but where feelings show up in the body, how they manifest sort of physically or somatically, and then prompting an exploration through the questions. So we give some suggestions in the cards, but it's really an invitation. What does it feel like to you?
Welcome to Season 15 of Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand that the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I am joined by Julie Kavanagh and Seth Shugar, who are the co-authors of the Feelings Deck for Kids, 30 Activities for Handling Big Emotions. Seth is a marital and family therapist, a relationship coach, a writer, and a former college professor. His therapeutic work, which integrates ego state psychology with somatic and mindfulness-based therapies, emphasizes the practice of tending to ourselves to sustain high-quality connections with others and the natural world. His co-author, Julie, and life partner, I might add, has also been writing stories for as long as she can remember, and so no surprise, her career began in marketing and communications. Today, she channels those skills into helping nonprofit organizations raise funds for important social causes. Inspired by her two children, she began writing stories to help her kids and other kids and their parents develop greater social and emotional intelligence. She is the author of Zimzimber, I love that name, which is an audio story that you can listen to on the Magic Kids app. Welcome to the show, Julie and Seth.
Thank you, Anita. Thanks for having us.
I just want to congratulate you on this. It is an extraordinary achievement, not only because I know what it's like to actually work hard on publishing something, but because it is so useful. It is so practical and so much fun and grounded in so much, I think, real science around how children get in touch with their feelings and how they learn to become expressive as people. So I just want to congratulate you. But I want to also know the backstory. So how did this beautiful deck come to be?
Well, as a child, I definitely had big feelings. And I was in a family where it looked like my siblings and my parents were otherwise really even keel, really chill. So I felt often confused about my big feelings. I think it made me be a little bit prone to anger because I was sort of trying to protect myself against these uncomfortable feelings that I often couldn't understand. And I felt sometimes that they were problematic. And so when we were talking about having our own children, it was really important to me that we raise them with language for feelings and to understand that it's perfectly healthy and normal to have a wide range of feelings. And so when I was, when they were little, I would spend hours just drawing. It was something that I love to do, that they love to do. And because I'm practical by nature, I'd find myself thinking like, gosh, what could I do right now to turn this into an educational moment? And so I started drawing on these little cards how feelings felt in the body. And I'm not an illustrator. I'm not a very good artist. So they were very simple drawings, but I liked thinking in like with similes and imagery and how, guilt can tug at you like a fish on a line, or loneliness can feel flat like a splotch of gum on the sidewalk. And I'd make all these little drawings. And at the time, I was also drawing faces with different facial expressions. And the kids would have fun sort of like matching the facial expression to a chest that was showing how, a feeling, a squeezing, a tightening, a pulling, a hot, cold. And they really enjoyed interacting with these drawings, and so did their friends. And then we had, friends of ours come over and say, wow, this is super interesting. And so that's like the very, very origin of this project.
And as you were working through the conceptualization of the project, I would love to know, because you are a mom, right? So you just described like, what it was like when you were growing up as a kid, having all these big feelings and not necessarily having words for them. Then you started raising your own children and started, seeing them have big feelings too and wanting to share. So I'm curious to know, like, as you were working on this deck, what did you learn about how important it is for parents to sort of help guide kids, in learning the language or the literacy of emotions? I'm just curious on a personal level.
I learned that it's definitely a practice. It's not, regulating my emotions as a kid did not come naturally to me, and it's still a practice. And so I think when they were little, they grew up with this. What I've learned is that they integrate this really well. And they're not always necessarily super keen on using it in the moment when they're having a hard time. There's resistance. There's resistance for all of us, for grown-ups too. But what I've noticed is they will help each other. So if my daughter's having a hard time, I've seen my son use unbelievable language to help her regulate her emotions and help her through it. And that is a really beautiful thing. So sometimes you think, God, I'm doing all this work. Is it really being integrated? And it is. Like, kids are taking it in, but you have to do it over time. It definitely is a process. Like I said, we've been doing this since they're little.
I love that. I love that. So now, okay, Seth, can I bring you into this conversation, because you're the other half of the partnership in the home front, the proud father of 2 kids as well, who also happens to be a therapist. So I wonder what you would have to say about how this deck, what it means for you, why you think it's important, anything else that you want to layer into what Julie just said.
Well, I think like basically my work as a therapist has kind of influenced the cards when Julie brought me onto the project. The way that I interacted with my clients and continue to on a day-to-day basis kind of inform some of the shape of the cards. And is the same thing as how we interact with our kids, or I interact with them, Julie too. And that is just to be like, when they're feeling big feelings, okay, well, what are you feeling? Asking that simple question, and then where do you feel that in your body? And what does it feel like there? If it's in your tummy, is it like a pit? Is it tight, or is it loose? Is it hot or cold? Is it moving, or is it still? What's it trying to communicate to you? Sometimes explicit conversations like that. And what does it need from you? I think those are the basic ones, and those are the ones that structure the cards. And it doesn't always go like that deep or in that order or anything like that. But holding space for big feelings, I know, is just so important for them, important for all of us.
So, Seth, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot here by asking, and Julie chime in as well, but I'm imagining as a parent that, and as an adult, just as a plain old adult, I mean, certainly I would feel the case that, teaching your children how to recognize and downregulate emotions, you might laugh at yourself a little bit when you're like, holy smokes, am I in touch with my feelings? Do I know how to downregulate? I wonder if you could speak to like the people who might be buying this, who are adults, saying, I might learn a thing or two from this as well. Is there something you've learned along the way?
Oh yeah, big time. That it's impossible, really. There's no way that you can be consistently hold space for our kids and their big feelings. I've never met anybody who's able to do it all the time. So to give ourselves a lot of grace, and to also to recognize increasingly when we're to speak personally, when I'm triggered and I'm like, oh, I'm really like losing it here, or I feel like a bubbling up or whatever, to peace out and have a little quiet time, to interact. I do a lot of parts work with myself, so interact with my parts and then come back and try to set a warm, firm, loving limit, or just, listen again. But yeah, anyway, I know it's very challenging. And
I think
the
it's so
challenge
important.
never ends.
It's so important to admit, because I think as parents, so much of our identity is attached to like how our children show up in the world. And there's a lot, we have to be humble in how unequipped we all are. And this is a great tool. It's a great tool for children. It's a great tool for us. And I loved, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw in a dedication, I think the deck is dedicated to your kids, or at least in a thank you note to your children, they made a big joke. Do you know what I'm talking about? What is it that they
Yes,
said?
in the dedication, it's to our kids, Tristan and Leela, who sometimes find it incredibly funny that we've written a guide to handling emotions.
That's what I mean. That's exactly it. Okay, that's so funny. Okay, because we really, I think,
But
people who are listening, there might be teachers listening, there might be parents listening. We don't get it right all the time, right? And that's even helpful for children to see.
100%. And I
feel-
think, like there's that kind of cliche now that our kids are our teachers, which I think is really true. Or, a little reframe in the internal family systems world is tormentor. Our kids push our buttons, and by tormenting us when they get our goats, they're mentoring us because they're pointing us to the places where we're still stuck, or, something that still needs to be kind of worked through, processed, interacted with, internally. So even if it's painful, it's always a little treasure trail,
Yeah, did you want to add something there to that, Julie?
Oh, I was just reminded of something that happened a couple of months ago, which was so humbling for me. I was with my daughter, and it was a charged moment, and there was a lot of emotion, and it was just a difficult moment. And I was getting flooded, and I knew I was getting flooded, and I had gotten to the limit of how much I could really hold space for her. And at one point, she kept coming with, everything. And I was like, you know what? I can't be having this talk with you right now. Like, I'm maxed out. I can't talk to you right now. This has got to stop. And she got up and she walked off, and she went into the kitchen, and I just heard her say, Dad, Mommy's making me push my feelings into my feet.
Is that one of the cards?
Like, wow, what's that?
Is that one of the cards?
It's not one of the cards, no.
Okay, card deck number 2. Thank you for sharing that. I really, really appreciate that. And I think sort of a meta takeaway at this point would already be for me that as humans, as adults, like some of what I do in terms of empathic leadership coaching is to actually become self-aware of how we're feeling in the first place. And I think it's one thing to develop the sophistication to actually recognize and articulate how we're feeling. But even step 1 is that we have feelings, and to be aware that we are having an emotional reaction to something. I mean, that's amazing, right?
Yeah,
100%.
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's
and that's what the cards do, Anita. Sorry. I was just
That's
going to say that's exactly what the cards do, is they give us vocabulary. They help us, recognize and then name our feelings. So they enrich our vocabulary, our language around feelings. Yeah.
beautiful. I mean, that's the whole point of it. And that's why I so believe in this card deck. I'm going to hold this up. I'm going to close it up and hold it up for people who are wondering. And for those who are listening on audio, Feelings Deck for Kids, Julie, Kavanagh, and Seth Shugar. Okay. So, it's back to school season. I couldn't imagine a more appropriate time than to talk about this feelings deck for kids, because teachers and parents can use it. I wonder whether or not you could speak to, an example of what a kid might go through when they're going back to school. Could you give me an example from your deck? Like, I don't know, one of you, like, choose something. Let me see if I can choose something. You have something in mind?
Well, I was, thinking about what, hopefully kids are feeling excited about going back to school. They could feel worried, they could feel nervous. Little ones often anticipate feeling shy. So if you want, I can walk you through a card. I can walk you through shy.
Beautiful.
And you can see how they're structured and how they help kids along.
Let's do it.
Okay. So this is shy.
Oh, do you want to give a call out to your illustrator who did a great job with that?
Yeah, that's Erica Lynn Jones.
Erica Lynn
Amazing.
Jones. That's
Beautiful.
a great job.
Beautiful. Okay, so
So
shy.
when I feel
see that.
shy, my chest closes up like a clamshell. So then on the back side, that looks like this. Have you ever felt like hiding when you were around people you didn't know? If so, maybe shyness was showing up. Think of a time you felt shy. Where did shyness visit you? In your shoulders? In your eyes? In your elbow? Shyness makes some people feel as tense as a tightrope. It makes others feel cramped like a crab under a rock. Next time you feel shy, try this. Pretend you're a grown-up cat and your shyness is an upset kitten inside you. What does the shy little kitten need from its parent? Does it need to be reminded that everyone feels shy sometimes, or reassured about how safe and wonderful it is, or encouraged to come out and play? Listen to your shy little kitten. Give it care and encouragement, just like a parent cat would. So, this is an invitation to have self-compassion and to help your child notice that they have a part inside them that is struggling, that's feeling shy, and that wants to hide. And what can we do to nurture that part so that it'll come out and play and, talk with others?
Two things come up. I think that's fantastic. And so am I getting it right? Well, I mean, I know, but I'm letting everybody else who's listening know each emotion, there's 30 of them in the deck, has an explanation of what the emotion is and then an activity that can be done, right? That's what, yeah.
Right.
What comes up for me is, one, you've normalized the emotion, right? And because we have access to this wide variety of emotions, but some of them are like more taboo or have more stigma attached to them, we're like normalizing the Penelope. What is that word? Penelope? What is it? What's that word I'm looking for? Penelope? No, not
Monopoly.
What?
Monopoly. Monopoly.
Beautiful. The plethora of emotions that we have. Thank you, Seth. You taught literature, right? The second thing, Julie, that I feel I heard you say is that, oftentimes children are told, oh, she's shy, as if the whole identity of the child is that thing. And I just heard you talk about parts, which I think is this internal family system stuff that you do, Seth. But you're saying a part of you feels shy in this moment, in this context, but not always. And then you're also not making that the identity of the child. Am I right?
Yeah, that's spot on, and there's more and more research that shows that the mind is plural, that we consist of what in IFS are called parts, and that neuropsychologists call subminds or subpersonalities or self states or mind states. There's all sorts of different language. But in addition to being true, empirically speaking, it seems it's also extraordinarily useful for exactly the reasons that you say. All of a sudden, it's not totalizing. It's not all of you that's shy all the time, always in the past, always in the forward. It's a part of you is shy, and it's just a part. And moreover, it creates a separation between that feeling of shyness and whoever or whatever great mystery it is that is able to kind of notice that shyness and then interact with it. And, and then ultimately in this card, give it loving kindness or benevolence or goodwill or compassion.
Okay.
So it's a game-changing paradigm shift.
And so you have opened up the segue. Let's talk about the science. So Seth, I'm going to ask you, because you've studied psychology and you are a therapist. I wonder if there is some legit science behind this deck. I imagine there is. So why don't you tell us?
Yeah, there is. There's a ton of science behind it. And there's basically 6 different processes that are kind of under the hood on each of the cards. And so if you like, we could walk you through each of the 6 main sort of steps or practices or skills. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. Maybe Jules, could you start us off? Yeah.
Absolutely. So the first thing that the card does is that it really helps us name and understand an emotion. So for example, here we have nervous. When I feel nervous, my tummy turns like a cement truck.
And so the first thing that all of the cards do is they just give us vocabulary language to name what it is that we're feeling. And there's a really, really robust evidence base that shows that the greater our ability to notice and name our feelings, the better we're able to regulate. In other words, manage them, respond skillfully to them. And, that basic insight goes all the way back to Aristotle and the Western tradition. And definitely, like in Buddhist psychology, the first foundation of mindfulness, actually the second foundation of mindfulness in the Satipatthana Sutta, the main practice manual, is mindfulness of feelings. And so it's a really ancient observation. But, you know, in the late 80s, Mark Brackett and others like him really did the empirical research to prove its effectiveness, how helpful it is. And then that research was popularized by Daniel Goleman and other people.
And so the goal, right, I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm taking away from this is not to not have the feelings. There's no part of this that is like, let's try to minimize the feelings. In fact, the idea is to surface the feeling, be aware that the feeling is happening in order to transcend it. Yeah, unless it's a good one that we want to stick with for a little longer, right? To savor, I imagine.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And we have 10 positive emotions in the deck as well. But yeah, transcend is one way. But also before the emotions run their course, which they're more likely to do if we're able to name them and tend to them, they often have vital information. And so there's a transmission of some kind that they're trying to make. And when the message is received, then they sort of dissipate or run their course more quickly.
Okay, 2 more questions before we move on, because I know you want to talk about these 6 things, but what's coming up for me is, one, is it true that our bodies feel a thing, then we have an emotion, and then we think about it? What order does it happen? Do you know that?
Yeah, and in fact, that's the second process or skill. Interoception is what the researchers.
All right, look at me. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And that order that you said it in is exactly right too. So one of the research terms for naming the feelings is emotion differentiation or emotional granularity. But the ability to notice and name the sensations or how feelings are showing up in the body, researchers call interoception. And so there's a bodily sensation before there's the emotion, before there's the cognition usually. And of course, it's more complex. It can go in the opposite order sometimes. So it's not a cookie cutter one size fits all thing, but yeah, usually the sensations come first. And that's built into the card strongly actually. And Julie really, that was one of the motivations for the cards, is to attend to how feelings show up in the body. Right, Jules?
Well, that's right. And so that's, one of the things that the cards do is really, like to your point, Anita, you talk about wanting to feel them fully, is taking the time to notice, where do they show up? They often show up in the upper part of the body, in the chest, in the heart, sometimes in the belly. So for example, I'll walk you through worried. When I'm worried, my mind feels tangled up like spaghetti noodles. And let me read to you where, every card has an invitation to focus on the body. When we often worry, when we're faced with something new and don't know how it will go. Think of a time you felt worried. Where did worry visit you? In your tummy, your forehead, your earlobes? For some, worry feels trembly like a leaf in the wind. For others, it feels jiggly like a bowl of jello.
Yeah.
And so that's a great example of how the cards are kind of training this awareness, not just of feelings, but where feelings show up in the body, how they manifest sort of physically or somatically, and then prompting an exploration through the questions. So we give some suggestions in the cards, but it's really an invitation. What does it feel like to you? Does it feel like tangled up spaghetti noodles, or does it feel, differently to you? And again, there's huge ancient precedents for this. And for example, the Satipatthana Sutta, the main, practice manual of Buddhist psychology, the first foundation of mindfulness is mindfulness of the body. And then there's been all this research that's been done more recently, and by Stephen Porges, and then the popularization of his work, Deb Dana, Peter Levine, somatic experiencing, and others that have really shone the spotlight warmly on how important it is to notice how feelings show up in the body.
I just feel that this work is like part of the pendulum finally swinging a little bit back from the Enlightenment. Like, I feel really angry that we've been in a paradigm where all of us are in our heads thinking all the time, and we're so like dislocated and disembodied from how we're feeling. And we have to actually learn how to do that right now. And I mean, better learn it sooner than later, right?
Totally.
100%. I mean, I can't tell you how often we have adults who see this deck and they go, oh, I need that, more so than the kids, because we are so up in our thoughts.
You should consider feelings deck for couples, feelings decks for like colleagues, where they have as much fun. Could you tell me, just for fun, because I know I'm going to have listeners and viewers that are going to say, I want to know what the exercise was for the first two cards that you went through, because you did it for the first one like 10 minutes ago.
Yes.
But I want to do these activities. I want people to hear about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So for nervous, because it's a very sort of busy feeling, the idea is to calm and to ground. And so the activity there is a mind jar, which, some parents might be familiar with. Anita, have you ever seen a mind jar?
No.
So you basically take a mason jar with a special solution of sort of soap and water, and glycerin, and you add sparkles to it. You can add coloring to it, and so you shake the bottle and it just becomes super busy, like a whirlwind,
This is
like a
Christmas
storm.
snow globe.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's an invitation to sort of breathe and watch the sparkles slowly sink to the bottom, just as our thoughts will do eventually, and we will downregulate.
I love that. I mean, I remember, so I have an 8-year-old daughter, and she has a school concert at the end of every year. And I remember saying to her, like, hey, if ever you feel the butterflies in your stomach, I said, mommy knows a lot about that. I get it in front of people and I do a lot of talking. I love my butterflies. I welcome my butterflies, but I'm like, they're here. I feel them. I can so see these little sparkles, like as they're settling, that you can learn to do some deep breathing, and that would be helpful. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh,
yeah, 100%.
And the second one?
And it's nice also because they get to choose their sparkles. It's personalized. It's something they enjoy looking at. They can choose the colors, and so they it becomes like personalized. Yeah.
And so are all of these, sorry to interrupt, but are all of the activities at the back things that you can do as a family, or that's intended to do as a family?
Yeah, they're almost all, they are. They're all actually family oriented. And the interesting thing about them, to me anyway, is that they're kind of a greatest hits collection of things that have been really the most helpful in our family, but also in my practice. And they've been plucked from other sources, and and they work great in a family context. And they're kind of tried, tested, and true in our family. And I run a little group called the Compassion Club, and we've done all of them in that group. And Julie and I ran a Mindful Munchkins program, and these are the ones that have worked the best for us.
Love it. I'm seeing a big nudge towards like once a week as a family doing something on the activity card that could, take up a little over half a year. Amazing. Okay, great. So did I cut you off again, Jules? Were you going to do the second card?
Yes, I'm happy to do the second card. The second card I did was worried, which, will come up during back to school for sure. And so here the invitation is to make a worry channel changer. And this is also something we've tried in our family and has worked really well. So you basically make your own channel changer. You cut out a piece of cardboard, and or you can, I think we had used an old channel changer, and then our son had put new buttons on it. And, it's an invitation. So that it's an invitation to just acknowledge you're worried and to say, that's okay. And how about we change the channel, and we invite here on the deck, on the card, to invite kids to go to the Just Breathe channel, or the Sunlight on Leaf channel, or any channel that they find comforting, knowing that, we can come back to the worry, but just for now, why don't we just take a little pause, from the worry. And it works really well. They feel in control. They interact with it. It's an object that's familiar to them. So it's been a really popular one.
Yeah, and the idea of coming back to the worry, sorry to cut you off, Seth, and I guess I'm just like so into this, is that we don't make good decisions when we're like stressed and worried and our amygdala is firing, right? We make good decisions when we're calmer. So to recognize it, maybe do some kind of whatever, change the channel to whatever works, and then come back to the worry in a different state with our parasympathetic nervous system not activated, you know, or deactivated.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. The idea is not to get rid of the worry or do emotional avoidance or whatever, but there's a great, amazing meditation teacher in Montreal named Pascal Auclair, and he has this beautiful question that he asks himself and invites other people to ask as well, which is, what else can be known? So there's worry here. It's present in the body. It's showing up however it's showing up, but rather than allow it to flood us, you know, what else can be known? The sunlight on a leaf, the breath or whatever, and to just tack to something and invite the attention to stay there for a little bit so that, like you said, you can come back in a more regulated state to the worry, and then maybe explore that and see what the worry is how it's trying to help, what it's scared would happen if it wasn't worrying so much and what it needs, you know?
Okay, and Seth, you mentioned somebody. We're going to include his website in the show notes, and you've mentioned a bunch of other people that you think might be worth exploring. That it'll be like a little task I'll ask if you put together a little best hits resources to include in this show notes. Okay, so we've done 2 out of 6. Yeah, as far as that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so the third thing these cards do is, once developing the ability to name the emotion and to really get attuned to where it shows up in the body really allows you to extend compassion to yourself and also leverage your breathing. And so this card here has an activity that leverages the breath. It's frustrated, hopefully does not show up during back to school. So it reads, when I feel frustrated, my chest burns like a marshmallow on a campfire. So it's very hot emotion, hence using the breath. So frustration often shows up when we're unable to achieve something. Think of a time you felt frustrated. Where did frustration show up in the body? Was it in your heart, your jaw, your teeth? For some, frustration feels spiky like a porcupine. For others, it feels jammed up like a printer. Next time you feel frustrated, try this. And so the invitation is to imagine filling a bubble wand full of bubble solution. Take a long breath, then slowly blow out into the bubble wand, trying to blow the biggest bubble you possibly can. Do this 3 times. Finally, imagine that whatever has been frustrating you is inside the giant glistening bubbles. And as it gently floats away, just watch it for a while and then wave it goodbye and wish it well.
I imagine between siblings that could be very helpful.
Totally.
There's like a fairness thing that enters for me. Is there another emotion? Because I think also what I'm picking up on is there's a lot of emotions that get conflated, right? Frustration is distinct from that's not fair, or is there a bit? Like, is there a feeling that's not fair?
You bring up a good point, is the nuanced emotions. I was speaking a couple of days ago with a young woman. She was 20 years old. And I happened to show her the resentment card. And she said, I only learned about resentment when I was 15, to really, really understand what it means. And so, fairness comes up, when there could be jealousy, frustration, resentment, anger.
And the research terms, not to sound too heady here, but I really like them. Emotion differentiation, differentiating one, parsing them, or emotional granularity. And Daniel Siegel's little jingle for this is name it to tame it. But the more precise you can get, and it doesn't have to happen verbally or with language, even just to savor the flavor, the tightness, but just be able to distinguish them like they're gourmet jelly beans or whatever. And one of the reasons why that's so conducive to emotional regulation is because it opens up the possibility of, like this card, leveraging the breath. And I recently read James Nestor's amazing book, Breathe, that just, just makes really all the science very accessible on how incredibly helpful the breath can be. But then also compassion, back to the first card Julie read, imagining yourself as a mama cat taking care of kittens or whatever. And the research base for that is super robust as well, with Kristen Neff and Chris Germer and Paul Gilbert and so many others,
So this is really entrenched in science. and we have breath available to us 24/7 for free, right? Okay, great. Is there anything you want to add to 3 before we move on to 4?
I just noticed that when you talked about, I love the way that you talked about your butterflies, Anita. And I'm to be honest, you seem like such a natural. I'm surprised you even feel them, but I'm not, because we do, right? Everybody does. But I love the way that you talked about them. You were like, you told Annika, I welcome them, and then you immediately said, and then I breathe into them. And it's just it sounds like very automatic for you, which is amazing. And it's not for everybody. It's not for all of us.
I think I had to learn it. We all have to learn it, hence these cards being very important. Let me hold these up again for everybody who is forgotten and hasn't placed an order. I'm really pushing these out there. Feelings deck for kids. All right, number 4.
So the 4 things this deck does is it really invites the savoring of positive emotion. So I think we said earlier, this deck contains 30 cards. 20 of them are what we would consider difficult emotions, and 10 are what we would call positive emotions. And so we wanted to include these because so often we have a positive emotion and we just sort of skip over it. It doesn't stay stuck in the body, and then you just move past it. And so the idea of savoring is letting a positive feeling really sink in and land. And so the positive feelings we have in this deck, I'll just name them quickly. We have joyful, courageous, proud, inspired, hopeful, peaceful, excited, empathic, grateful, and compassionate. And so one, little exercise we have in here that I think really, I do regularly when I feel anything that's positive is sort of this bubble bath meditation. And so basically this is associated to the card joyful, but it works for any positive emotion. And so you imagine yourself sinking into the feeling like you're sliding into a warm bubble bath, and you feel the warmth, heating you up, and you sense the bubbles tingling on your skin, and you smell the fruity scent. And to add more bubbles, you think of other joyful memories or thoughts of gratitude just to enhance it. And you soak in that bubble bath for at least 3 deep belly breaths.
There's the breath again. Mm-hmm. I love it because, I'm teaching my first positive psychology class this fall on happiness to young professionals that are going out into the business world. So there's an element about organizational wellness in there too. But I'm a big fan of positive psychology, and, just the idea that humans, we're not just a bunch of dysfunction. We also have traits and capacities that we're born with that we can develop, empathy being one of them, that actually really enriches our lives. And so I think it's also really important that children learn to appreciate and savor, those positive feelings, right? Like feeling proud of an accomplishment, it shouldn't be just like a passing thing. Like you can come back to this feeling proud of doing well on a test or scoring a goal on the baseball field, or just feeling proud that I've learned to read, or whatever else is going on in their lives. And this idea of extending the feeling of these positive emotions, it actually lends to a happier, more fulfilling life. And there's research around that too, right?
Yeah, and what I love about the research, because there's precedence in the wisdom traditions of the world for basking or relishing or rolling around in gratitude or joyfulness or whatever it is. But the research has done such a good job. Like Rick Hansen has this line that we have, the negativity bias endows us with brains that are like Velcro.
Say that
for
again.
negative
Sorry, it
experience.
was very fast. Say again.
Oh, Rick Hansen has this nice line, which is based on a lot of research, that the negativity bias has endowed us with brains that are like Velcro for negative experiences and like Teflon for positive experiences.
Wow.
And all this research by Barbara Fredrickson, Fred Bryant on savoring, Robert Emmons on gratitude, and there's a couple others in there as well, just show that in order to encode or install positive experiences like pride, in our neural networks, we have to stay with them for 15 or 20 seconds. Neurons that fire together wire together. But if we don't stay with them for long enough, the science shows they don't get installed, and we don't broaden and build. Barbara Fredrickson's term those neural kind of capacities. So the research heightens the practices that are there, but it allows us to, I think, fine tune them and make sure that we, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so excited. Okay, so finish your thoughts, Seth.
Oh, and that's what informs the little, meditations like the bubble bath, soaking in and breathing in, and then also noticing where the feeling of pride shows up in the body, because that has us stay with the experience. And I love your metaphor of extending, stretching it out, marinating in it. Yeah.
What came to me and why I got all sort of like excited about that is like, when your kid runs to you with something that exciting going on in their world, and we react like we're like happy to see our children happy. But if we're like in the middle of doing something, we'll like acknowledge, and then we'll go back, and God forbid it's our phone. And oftentimes it's our phone or our work or whatever, or dinner. But you just said, like, I mean, it's such a big takeaway. Do you hear that 15 seconds? Is everybody who's listening and watching hear that 15 seconds changes things? Like, that's an empirical piece of research, that if we stay with the feeling for 15 seconds, and we can do that, we can gift that to our children, right? Okay. You've just given me a great gift. Okay. So thank you for that.
And if I could just plug one person's work, I find the guy who does the greatest job at popularizing the hard empirical research on this is Rick Hansen. And he has one whole book-length treatment of this, which is Hardwiring Happiness, which informs, I'd say, all of the positive feelings in the feelings deck. Beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay. Are we at 5 now? We're getting to 5?
We are at 5.
All right.
So this one is right up your alley, Anita. So the better we understand our own feelings, the better we are at understanding what other people might be feeling. The more attuned we are with ourselves, the more attuned we are with others. No surprise. So this brings us to the empathic card. Yay! When I feel empathic, my heart reflects the feelings of others like a lake mirrors the sky. I love her beautiful, gentle eyes in this illustration. And so would you like me to read through the card or just get to the exercise?
Both.
All right. So empathy is the ability to feel what others are feeling. Think of a time you felt empathic. Where did you feel it? In your chest, your belly, your ankles? For some, empathy feels harmonious, like two people singing the same note. For others, it feels luminous, like fireflies at night. So to build empathy, try this. And so we invite children to make a pair of magic empathy glasses by drawing a picture of eyeglasses on paper and cutting them out and sticking 2 straws on each side. And when you put on the glasses, imagine that they magically allow you to see other people's difficulties as well as their inner goodness. So for example, if someone cuts in front of you in a line, instead of seeing them as a budger, you might see that they're actually kind, but they're missing their mom. What else can you see?
Or maybe hungry.
Totally.
100%.
Love that. Love that empathy is in this card deck.
And if I could just say one thing about that, this particular card almost explicitly, invites the people who are doing it to take another person's perspective. So it's like explicitly kind of training empathy. But all of the cards implicitly train empathy, because there's good research on this. Antonio Damasio, and more recently, Ann Bockler in Germany. The better we understand, and Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence is conducive to social intelligence. The better we understand our own feelings, thoughts, sensations, the more likely we are to be aware that other people are feeling similarly. And this recent research published in a paper called Know Thyself by Bockler actually shows more specifically, the more aware we are of our quote unquote negative or vulnerable feelings, that is a key predictor of how well we'll be able to read and understand others. And so all of the cards implicitly train empathy.
Love it. Maybe that's why I like it so much. Can you give me permission to hold this up one more time? You know, I never product place, but this is probably the thing that I want my listeners and viewers to pick up for themselves or for teachers or parents in their lives. I think this work is so important. Last but not least, are we at number 6?
We are at number 6. So, you know, emotional intelligence is not something that you do once and then it's one and done. It is a practice. And so many of these, if not all of these activities, crafts, meditation, are things that can be done regularly over time because we want to build habits. So one, I would say the most popular craft we have in the feelings deck for kids is called the gratitude gumball machine. We have one at home. It has a central place in our dining room. We interact with it all the time. It's so fun. So I will walk you through the gratitude card. So when I feel grateful, my heart feels open like a water lily in full bloom. And so we continue with, we feel grateful when we really appreciate something, like a good friend or a yummy sandwich. Think of a time you felt grateful. Where did you feel it? In your chest, your eyes, your armpits? You might have noticed we always have a little joke in there just to keep it fun for kiddos.
I heard the elbow a few cards ago.
For some, gratitude feels spacious like a meadow. For others, it feels sparkly like moonlight dancing on water. So to make a gratitude gumball machine, the invitation is to write or draw things that, you know, we're grateful for on colorful pieces of paper and put them inside, you know, a glass jar that then we flip over and put into a tissue box, and we just cut a little opening so the papers can fall through. And later, when you need a boost, you take a piece of paper out of the gumball machine and you pretend it's a delicious gumball and you savor it. What would gratitude taste like if it were a real gumball of gratitude? And so we do this all the time. We take the time to write things we're grateful for periodically and put them, and at the same time, we'll just go inside and fish out a bunch of memories that could be years and years old. And it just brings us right back to like a great moment.
I just think that this deck is not only useful for the goal that you have in mind with it, but just in terms of family gathering and doing something fun together. I love it. I love it. I love it. It makes me think of when I bought the deck. We have a gratitude journal where all three of us, me, my husband, and Annika, my daughter, will share what we're grateful for that day. And when I bought the deck, we started a process of laying out all the cards on the table and choosing a moment to talk about that happened during the day when we were feeling grateful or lonely or hopeful. And I think, you know, where I want to end, because I want to ask my ending question of a purposeful empathy story, but I think to tie up this part of the conversation, since I'm talking about how I'm using it, I just want to draw attention to anybody who's thinking about getting the deck. That is, that you even include information on how to use the deck, right? Where you can talk, the cards can be used in a variety of ways. So there's 4 ways that you illustrate. One is after the storm has passed. When a child is caught up in a big emotion, talking doesn't usually help. They need time and space to feel what they're feeling first. And after that storm has passed, you can connect with your child using the cards. I think that's one way. Then during family time, carve out a time to sit together as a family, as a group, once a week, once a day, or anything in between, and ask the person to select a card that contains a feeling that they want to talk about, which is sort of how we're using it. Before you step out the door, put the deck somewhere near the front door, and before you or your kids leave, fan out the cards in front of your children and invite them to pick a card and review it before leaving, creating a ritual that keeps emotional awareness fresh and in their minds, and set an intention. Pull the positive emotion cards out of the deck and ask each person in the family to choose one card that represents an intention or an emotion that they value and that they want to cultivate that day. You know, I suspect other people who are going, oh, and there's another one, gamify the cards. This card deck can be adapted into a game of charades by inviting one person to pick a card and act out a feeling while the rest of the family or group guesses the emotion. I think there's probably so many other ways that the card deck can be used. So I would invite listeners and viewers, the viewers anyways, on YouTube to put in the chat any other ways that you can think of or that you are using the deck with, so that we can learn from each other. Is there anything before I go to my last question? I'm so sorry we're running out of time here, but that you want to add that you think we haven't covered or that you want to layer in?
I might just add really quickly that I think the most important thing about the way to use the cards, for me anyway, is the importance of monkey see, monkey do, and modeling and kind of living it. You know, the way that I understand the cards anyway is that they're there to support, you know, families in an ongoing effort to cultivate emotional and social intelligence. And so the cards are, at least as I understand them, like kind of a supplement. But one of the things that they do is they create an ongoing context, like the gratitude gumball machine. That's something that we've had going for years, and we come in and out of it. But it creates a context where the conversation can continue, and habits of emotional awareness and social intelligence can get installed over time, ideally, mainly through modeling, with the cards as a kind of adjunct, you know, and a support.
It's beautiful. And for those, you're going to be listening to this, this is dropping in, close to September when everybody's going back to school, but not too far away from now. We're going to blink and it's going to be the holiday season and it's going to be New Year's. And you may, if you're listening or watching, consider a New Year's resolution around, elevating emotional literacy in your family or in yourself as like one of those goals.
And Anita, can I jump in one last time here? I pulled this quote from Mark Brackett, who's one of the early researchers and also one of the, what's the right word for this, crusader for emotional intelligence. And this is from a recent edition of Psychology Today. He writes, as we see it, the number one problem with emotional intelligence is implementation. People give lip service to wanting emotional intelligence, but don't necessarily devote effort to gaining the skills. You can't hold a 1 hour workshop or put kids in a circle to talk about their feelings and call it EI, emotional intelligence. And you can't teach EI to children until you teach adults first. Parents have to live it at home. Teachers have to model it in school. And I think that's vitally important.
Which I think is why the trauma healing discourse right now that is so, it's in my face anyways. I don't mean that in a negative, pejorative way. I think there's so much work that we adults have to do if we are going, we care a lot about sustainability and leaving the world a better place. And certainly we're worried about climate change and what are we doing about that so that we can, so our children and our progeny can inherit a better earth. This is like so important to do the work of healing and becoming more mature around our own emotions so that we can be better for our children. Really, really. And when I think about the family that I grew up in, I mean, I don't know your individual backstories. I mean, we're circling back to Julie saying that you had big emotions in your family, but you wouldn't necessarily know how to name them. Like, I think all of us to varying degrees have had childhood traumas, and it's such a important responsibility to go on a healing journey around them, whether it's through therapy or other modalities. That's the gift we can give the next generation.
And it's totally supportive of sustainable, purposeful empathy and, engagement and tackling these big problems. Is that, it's supportive of that.
So I wish this conversation could go on, and I'm sure the parents and teachers and other listeners who are listening and watching the same thing, but here we are. The last question I like to ask my guests, and here I get twofer with both of you on the call at the same time, is to circle back to the empathy. And if you can think of a time in your life, I'm going to ask you, Julie, first, and certainly if there's anything that you want to add that we haven't spoken about, feel free to chime in. But if you can think of a time in your life when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
I have a memory that really stands out in my mind from when I was younger. I was a teenager and I was feeling heartbroken after a relationship ended. And I was up in my room and my father walked in and he sat on my bed and he just said, you know what, right now, everything's really dark. And there probably doesn't seem to be anything good in your life. And there's also nothing I can say, but I want you to know that I know what you're going through and I've been there and it's going to be okay. And, those were not interactions I had a whole lot with my father. I mean, he's lovely, so lovely in so many ways. But going sort of, that felt like a deep moment. And to have it be my dad in particular, who just, I could feel in that moment that he felt my heartache. I imagine he had probably felt that himself deeply. And I felt really seen. I felt really heard. I felt really understood. And it has never left me. I could feel it right now, as if it had just happened.
It's a beautiful story. That is a beautiful story. That is a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. Seth, is there a story that
I have one actually that's a little bit similar, and it involved my dad as well. So my dad said something that just cut me deeply. I was deeply, deeply hurt, and I had a big protective, angry part kind of take over, and I was fuming mad. And I went to my bedroom to peace out at the time, to cool down. And I was in my bedroom and I was just fuming. And my brother's wife, Sarah, came into the room and she sat down on the bed and she looked at me softly and in a really soft, kind of just present tone. She was like, "What's going on? Like, what are you feeling?" And I said, what was happening. And she just echoed it back in her own words. And then she told me why it made sense. And it was like the anger was like, and in that moment, it just went, it completely like deflated it all. And I was like, I need to figure out what that was and how to do that. And it really kind of subtly changed the trajectory of my life in a way. Because I was like, I really, really need to figure out how to do that, offer that to others as well. And actually, while I'm thinking of it, can I tell one more, Anita?
Bonus, go for it, Seth.
Yeah, is that okay? One other quick one that just that made me think of is I think probably like all kids growing up had to figure out how to navigate aggression, anger, healthy aggression, especially as a boy playing sports, yada yada. And I grew up in a family where conditions were such that I felt I had to tuck away a fair amount of my anger. And went to a family Christmas party, and my grandmother's sister, Arnie, gave me this shiny red Christmas bulb. And I was like, "What's this for?" And she was like, "Oh, you have to hold it over the hearth of the fire and let it smash." So I was like, okay. And I did that, and it was kind of fun to smash this little thing. And inside there was this little $5 bill rolled up, which was her Christmas present. And somehow just seeing that, I just felt super like she got me, she understood, and she was kind of conveying in this vaguely poetic way the value of expressing healthy aggression. And I just felt like, whoa, she really understands me and my life and this little challenge that I have, this little, thing.
I love it because this is the question I love to end with, because no matter who I talk to, they could be neuroscientists, they could be historians, they could be in political science, social science, they have their own lived experience. Everybody who's on the show has something to say about empathy. And when I asked them to close out the podcast with how it felt to receive empathy, everybody has a place to go to. And I'm always reminded, the grounded nature of this question for me is that it's always a reminder how accessible empathy is if we decide to act with purpose, right? And that if we could turn up the volume of empathy in our lives, our relationships would benefit, and so would the world. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being part of the podcast. Folks, Feelings Deck for Kids, Julie Kavanagh and Seth Shugar, thank you so much for joining this episode.
Thanks for having us, Anita.
Much, Anita.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
Thanks so much for watching another episode of Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. So now the invitation is to subscribe to the channel and consider picking up a copy of Purposeful Empathy. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day.